Hello everyone and welcome back to TowerGate. It is day 160, Saturday, August the 12th, 2017. Hopefully it's a beautiful day where you are. It certainly is where I am here in southern Ohio. Getting ready to go out here and hit the grocery store and do a little grass cutting, a little weed eating, get it all done and enjoy the rest of the weekend. And it is movie night. Haven't decided what we're going to watch tonight, but I'm sure it'll be a new one and an old one, as we usually do. Maybe even throw something on the grill. The first story coming to you today is really from two sources covering the same story, a slightly different take. I'll kind of put the two together and give you my take. Coming to you from the Daily Caller and from Dick Morris. Christopher Steele says he did not write the dossier. Says it was based on unsolicited material from anonymous sources. So if it was unsolicited material, that is telling us that he didn't go out and look for this material, that this material was coming to him. Unsolicited. From anonymous sources. Well, certainly he knows who these sources are. We know from the original dossier that was leaked, he dropped source A, source B, source D, skipped source E, went to source F, and named those as his sources and gave us their particular positions. So was he lying? Or were those sources, was information collected from those sources and then given to Steele by a third party who actually created the narrative and then gave it to Christopher Steele, who then passed it on to GPS? It's pretty obvious that the farther we go down this road, the closer we get to these court hearings, the more that Christopher Steele is backing away from his association with the dossier. He wants to create as much distance between him and the information in the dossier as possible. Could be a legal tactic to avoid having to pay large damages in the civil lawsuit that he's now facing against Mr. Guparev. But at some point, you got to wonder how long he and GPS can stay on the same sheet of music before they get separated and torn from each other. Because now this is questioning what GPS Fusion has been saying, which is that Christopher Steele was their source. It appears now from Christopher Steele that he only produced the dossier, but that he did not write it. That it was based on unsolicited material from anonymous sources. So who was giving Christopher Steele this information? Could it have been the FBI? We are now learning that Christopher Steele has a long relationship with the FBI, that he has worked with them. He and his company Orbis has worked with the American FBI over the past 10 to 12 years on 3 or 4 different cases, including the FIFA case, which was the investigation into the International Soccer Association. Apparently Christopher Steele worked with the American FBI in that case and several others. So Christopher Steele is no stranger to the American FBI. We also know that we have a very close link here because we have John Brennan, who is a hatchet man for Hillary Rodham Clinton. He was hoping to remain the CIA director in her administration. He is a Clinton lackey. He appears to have had some association with Fusion GPS, as has the FBI. So if Fusion GPS is sort of like the glue between the FBI or the CIA or both, and Christopher Steele, this opens up some brand new questions, because apparently no one now wants to be responsible for the dossier. Somebody wrote it, didn't they? Those are the questions that we need to get answered from Mr. Simpson and from Mr. Steele. And something tells me that eventually we will get there. The president's not going to let go of this. Neither am I. Many other people are not going to let go of this. Remember, excuse me, gets a little frustrating as you're going through this process because we want everything to happen now. We say, well, question this guy, have this hearing, do this, do that. Yes, we need to do all those things, and yes, things are not moving at the pace that they should because there was a lot of obstruction going on by the Democrats that sit on these committees that don't want the truth to come out because they know where it leads. It leads everywhere. In the case of Watergate, it took 2.5 years from the time the burglary occurred until people started going to jail. 2.5 years, during which time there was many down periods where there was nothing happening in the story. It wasn't moving. It had hit a wall. But Deep Throat kept giving Woodward information. They kept writing the stories. They kept appearing on the back page of the Washington Post. No one else would touch the story until eventually they got inside the committee to re-elect the president and found the secret slush fund, which was tied to the burglars. At which point people began to feel the heat. One of those people, the rat, John Dean, began to feel the heat and began to believe he was going to be the fall guy, the scapegoat. And so he did what people do in that position when they see the walls closing in on them. They start singing like a bird to save their neck. So we are about 8 or 9 months into this investigation. It will continue, and as the old Russia narrative, false Russia-Trump collusion narrative falls away, the only thing that will be left standing will be the true crimes that were committed and the relentless pursuit of getting an answer to those questions. And there are many people in pursuit of that, including the president, his lawyer, Jay Sekulow, myself, many other YouTubers. A lot of people are not letting this go, including the Freedom Caucus, led by Jim Jordan, 33 members of the House, several members of the Senate, including Mr. Nunes, who's not gone away. Oh yes, I have some more information about Mr. Nunes today for you. But the bottom line is, what we are seeing is that Christopher Steele is doing everything he can. He may be the John Dean of this situation because he is the man who is likely to be the scapegoat, one of the scapegoats. There may be several or many. It looks like he's not willing to play the game. He hasn't rolled over on anybody yet, but he certainly is feeling the heat. And he, of course, knows about that list that the Reverend Hillary Rotten Clinton, the impressive list of people like Mr. Steele that have become a threat to the Clintons. What has happened to them? Mr. Steele is sweating, I can assure you that. And he apparently is trying to find some way to save his neck. Here's a follow-up to that. The former British spy who purchased the dossier could be forced to testify before a U.S. court in the near future. On Wednesday, this past Wednesday, Mr. Gubarev, so lawyers, filed a motion in U.S. District Court of Southern Florida asking the judge on the case to submit a request for an international justice assistance with the court in London, where Steele works and lives. According to a request filed on Wednesday, Gubarev wants Steele to reveal what instructions were given to him to prepare the dossier, as well as information about payments he received for his work on the document, how he obtained information for the dossier, and how he prepared it. You see, Mr. Gubarev understands, as his lawyers do, that you need to keep applying the pressure. And eventually, something has to give. Someone has to give it up. And I guess they believe that that person is Christopher Steele. But they've also told us, as we learned a couple weeks ago, that they believe in their deposition that the person who most likely did the leaking was John McCain. But they also state, or the attorneys for Fusion GPS are stating, that it was Christopher Steele who had motivated and persuaded and pushed GPS to get the dossier out to media outlets. And we know they both did. Both Mr. Steele and Fusion GPS provided various media organizations with excerpts from the dossier, and finally the entire 35-page dossier, which was given to BuzzFeed and published. And it was in that 35-page dossier where Mr. Gubarev was named as the person who organized the actual technical hack of the DNC, which he denies, and which we now know is false, because we know that there was no hack of the DNC. We know it was a leak, and we know who that leaker was, don't we? Another question: why would Christopher Steele be paid $160,000 to be nothing more than a post office drop? The answer: he wouldn't. Someone was providing Christopher Steele with the information that is in the dossier. Someone was providing him with that information. Who? Could it have been some of Brennan's operatives at the CIA feeding information to these 5 sources, former Russian officials? Could it have been Comey? Because we have something going on here now. We have Christopher Steele now saying he didn't write the dossier, that he just took the information and essentially put it into its package and sent it on to Fusion GPS, as well as other sources. There's missing pieces in this puzzle, my friends. Missing pieces. There are not many people I can think of, or organizations I can think of, who could have been in the mix in this sordid affair. The Guardian: 2 U.S. congressional aides were sent to London in July to try and contact Christopher Steele or his attorneys. They were alleged to have been sent by Chair of the House Intelligence Committee, Devin Nunes. Mr. Nunes is quietly going about his business. Democrats on the committee are very upset because they were not told about this attempt to contact Mr. Steele in London. The 2 staffers showed up unannounced to Steele's office in London, while Steele was known to be in the building. Apparently, Mr. Steele is playing a little cat and mouse, because upon learning that these individuals were in the building looking to have a conversation, Mr. Steele found the back door and got the hell out of there. He's on the run, playing cat and mouse. Mr. Steele doesn't want to talk very much, but I'm afraid that Mr. Steele is going to find himself facing some very serious questions, the answers to which could be very bad for his health. Also, Mr. Conaway was not told. Now, if you remember, Mr. Conaway was the number 2 Republican on the Senate Intel Committee. He assumed the leadership position on all things Russia after Devin Nunes was forced to step down as head of this particular inquiry because he went over and looked at some documents at the White House without telling someone or what have you. So, essentially what we can ascertain from this, the fact that Mr. Conaway, who I told you was a fraud, being kept out of the loop, as well as Mr. Schiff and others, tells you that Mr. Nunes does not trust his Republican colleague, and Mr. Conaway certainly doesn't trust Mr. Schiff. So behind the scenes, very quietly, it appears that Mr. Nunes has not gone away. He's known to be a close confidant, associate of the White House, a good friend of Trump. I'm telling you, friends, I'm telling you, this thing's not going away. Trump's not letting go, nor is Mr. Nunes. They understand the process. They understand the painstaking process that has to be dealt with and gone through before you can finally begin to dig up the truth. It's just the process. Be patient. Be patient. Townhall.com. Jeff the Flake, Arizona Senator Jeff the Flake, is now facing a serious primary challenge from Kelly Ward. I believe she's either a doctor or a lawyer. She's the one who challenged McCain the last time he ran. And of course McCain won that Senate seat, maintained his Senate seat, and she lost. She also is a talk show host as well. Anyway, Kelly Ward is now going to be facing off against Jeff the Flake in Arizona, the other senator from Arizona, who has seen his poll ratings drop in a major way because he has not supported the president. Kelly Ward, on the other hand, is a huge supporter of the president and his legislative agenda, and she will be running on that, as I stated exactly in a couple videos ago. That's exactly what these primary opponents should do. Run against these anti-Trump Republicans and make the sole centerpiece of your campaign the fact that you'll support the president. That's a winning strategy, my friends. So Kelly Ward lost to Magoo in that election, but now she has Flake in her sights. So it's beginning. Keep watching, my friends. You're going to see much more of this type of thing happening. And of course, I have a plan. I'll be in contact as we approach the 2018 elections here in the next couple of months. After the first of the year, I will begin contacting some of my fellow YouTubers, the producer at Sean Hannity radio program, which I've had communications with. And we are going to work on a program. Yes, we are. But it seems like it's already starting without me, which is good. Because there's a couple things that have to be dealt with in this process. Here's a little thing I'll point out to you a couple months ahead of schedule. What happens a lot of times, and people say, you know, the establishment candidate always wins. 99% of the time, it's nearly impossible to get rid of them. They have many tricks. They have all the money, the media, they have it all. But those days are over because the mainstream corporate media is shriveling. It's going away. And the alternative independent media is gaining more and more power. It was very, very important in the 2 Obama elections, the way he used social media. Trump proved it as well. It will only be more so in the 2018 and 2020 elections. But it seems like the deck is stacked against the primary challengers to an establishment candidate, and they are. And there's a dirty little trick that the establishment plays. I know because I watched it here in my district time after time after time when John Boehner was my congressman, former Speaker of the House. What Mr. Boehner would do, because he was always under challenge here every 2 years, there would be 3, 4, 5 guys primarying John Boehner. And what we would learn after the fact is that at least 1, maybe 2 of those so-called primary challengers were actually working for the GOP. What they were doing is they were saying, okay, Boehner's got a couple of serious primary opponents. What we need to do is we need to split the primary opponent's vote. So we're going to throw a couple guys in there as phony anti-Boehner guys, anti-establishment guys, and we're going to have them go in there so that we have a crowded field of primary challengers to split up the vote between 3, 4, 5 people, making it nearly impossible to beat Boehner. Because even if he only got 40% and the other 3 or 4 got 60%, he would still win, because their 60% would be divided among 3 or 4 people. So this is one trick that the establishment likes to play, is that they will put phony candidates in there to dilute the anti-establishment vote. Boehner did it here every 2 years, for 15 years, 20 years. This is something I'm aware of. So part of my plan, which I don't hear many people talking about, which you will hear about, is that what the primary opponents must do is they must form a pact at the very beginning and say, okay, look, we all agree that the number one thing we must do is take out the establishment candidate, whether that be Mr. Flake or whoever, Mr. Ryan, whoever. But what we need to do is make sure that there's only one of us running head-to-head against him. Because if there's 2, 3, 4, 5 of us, it splits the vote between us. And we'll never defeat the establishment candidate that way. It has to be 1 against 1, heads-up competition in order to have a chance to defeat the establishment candidate. So what the challengers need to do, whether there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever there are, they need to form a pact at the very beginning and agree that when they get 2 to 3 weeks out from the date of the election to vote, only the highest vote person at that point should move on to face the establishment candidate in a head-to-head challenge. And the others should drop out and throw their support behind the anti-establishment candidate, so it will be a 1-on-1 contest instead of a 5-on-1 contest, where the vote will be diluted and the establishment candidate will win. Now, what this will do is 2 things. Number 1, greatly increase your chances of beating the establishment candidate. And number 2, it will shine the light on who the rat is, or rats. It will shine the light on who the fake candidates are, because they will not join the pact. And if they will not join the pact, it tells you that they're not interested in defeating the establishment candidate. They're only there to dilute the vote of those who would challenge the establishment candidate. This is going to be a critical part of making this plan effective. And that's what I'm all about, folks. Effectively defeating the establishment candidates who are anti-Trump. This is something that has to be done, and this is what I'll be communicating to various YouTubers as well as some other folks. We must have a pact where the anti-establishment candidates join together and agree that they'll all support the highest vote getter when we get a couple weeks out, that they'll all drop out and throw their support behind him. This is what has to happen if you want to defeat them. You'll never defeat them by diluting the vote between 3, 4, 5 different people. And that's what we're going to do. Gateway Pundit, Special Counsel Mueller now has a new target, Reince Priebus. Following the raid on Manafort's home at 3 o'clock in the morning with a SWAT team, it appears now that they're also looking a little deeper into Reince Priebus. So, what is Uncle Bob's plan? Well, let me tell you what Uncle Bob's plan is. And we know this because Uncle Bob has done this before when he was FBI director before and when he was at the Justice Department. And it's a very common tactic used by crooked lawyers and prosecutors. What they're going to do is they know they can't get to Trump, so what they're going to do is they're going to investigate the hell out of Manafort, try to find one tiny little thing, at which point they're going to levy many charges based on that to bring a bunch of heat on Manafort, so that they can then go to him and say, well, you know, Paul, you're looking at some serious problems here, a lot of legal fees, a lot of lawsuits, a lot of criminal charges, possible jail time, this and that and the other. It looks real bad for you, Paul. But what you can do to make it all go away is give us something on Trump. Give us something on Trump, and it all goes away. Mueller has a history of operating in this method. Now, maybe Mr. Manafort has showed signs that he is not going to collapse so easy. He also is an attorney, and a very good one. And he also has attorneys, very good ones. He understands the game, and it's doubtful that he'll fold. So now it looks like they're going to continue on that path, of course, to see if they can find enough heavy stuff that they can drop on Manafort that would maybe force him to give up Trump on something. God knows what it would be, but anything. Just anything. But it looks like they're also going to work a second track, which is Mr. Priebus, to see if maybe there's something they can do there, because Trump fired Priebus. Maybe they think, hey, Trump fired him. Maybe he'll be wanting to get back at Trump. Let's give him the opportunity to do that. You can bet that they'll be looking into other people around Trump as well. Anyone that they can find, any little thing that they can use to pressure them into giving up Trump, because it's not Manafort, it's not Priebus or anyone else that are in the crosshairs of the assassin, Mr. Mueller, Uncle Bob, and his Hillary Clinton donor posse. This is the angle he's going to take. But I've got a word for you, Bob. Here's a word for you that you might want to get comfortable with. That word is pardon. The presidential pardon. The president can pardon anybody he wants, anytime he wants, for any reason he wants. My guess is that through some back channels, Trump and his attorneys are going to let it be known to Mr. Manafort, possibly Reince Priebus. He's going to let them know that the president does have the option to exercise a presidential pardon. Take that, Uncle Bob. The pardon. That's how you take care of Uncle Bob. Pardon anyone he goes after. And when you're done with that, take a look at Mr. Mueller's activities, which I have been doing recently, and I'll be talking more about that in a future video. It appears that Mr. Mueller is not as clean as the wind-driven snow. No, he's not. He's got some issues in his past, and I think that when he gets done with his little witch hunt, he may find some things visited upon him, which he might be very uncomfortable with. Let's hope so. The number 2 man at the DNC just committed political suicide. Keith Ellison. Keith Ellison is an a-hole, we all know that. And he is the token black man for the DNC, number 2 man to Mr. Perez. He was making a speech the other day, and he said that Kim Jong-un is more responsible than President Trump. That is the type of quote, that is the type of sound bite that will come back and bite you in the ass for the rest of your political career. His political career is over. You understand me? His political career is over. That might play to a group of radical left-wing Democrats in some speech he was making, but on the national stage, it ain't gonna fly. I can promise you that. We also have Jane Sanders, who has a head on her like a house cat, who may soon be sharing a cell with the Reverend Hillary Rotten Clinton, as the evidence now becomes overwhelming, and the donors that she claimed in the bank fraud case that she's facing are now going to come out and be the number 1 witnesses testifying against her. The House Freedom Caucus excuse me, is discharging a petition to repeal Obamacare, which Mr. McConnell will have to sign on to or walk away from in September. The end is coming for Mr. McConnell. It's just a matter of time. Mo Brooks, Senate Republican, is now calling for McConnell to step down. He suggests that change may be coming. Now, this little petition is just another one of these many things that members of Congress have in their arsenal. Usually, this particular measure is used to get rid of something in a piece of legislation that's preventing a piece of legislation from moving forward. But it appears that they're going to use this tactic in order to repeal Obamacare, or at least force all those Republicans who voted for this exact same bill several times to come back and either vote for it or against it, which will seal their political fate in the upcoming 2018 elections. That's what Mr. Jordan is doing. He's putting people on the line, forcing them to either put up or shut up. Very good move by Mr. Jordan and the Freedom Caucus. Okay, folks, it's Saturday evening. Time to get on with some other things. I appreciate you for tuning in today. TowerGate, Day 160, Saturday, August 12th, 2017. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'll be back tomorrow with a Sunday evening video. You all have a good night. Goodbye.